This picture is going viral with Bria Hartley with the sinister grin, right? This malevolent look that's on her face right now. Clearly smiling after injuring Sophie Cunningham, man.
Bria Hartley just took Sophie Cunningham out of the game with what looked like a brutal leg collision.
The play itself looked like nothing out of the ordinary until it wasn't. Sophie Cunningham drove hard, planted, and then crumpled. She clutched her knee as the arena gasped. Trainers sprinted in, teammates circled, and for a moment, it felt like the entire game had frozen. On broadcasts across the country, fans sat staring at the replay, waiting for clarity. Was this a freak accident, or had someone crossed a line? That's when the cameras shifted, and there she was, Bria Hartley, not pacing in concern, not throwing her hands up at the foul. Instead, she was caught with a smirk, just a flicker of expression. Half a second, maybe less. But in today's sports world, half a second is enough to tell an entire story. Within minutes, that grin was everywhere. It was clipped, replayed, slowed down, and looped on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The image spread faster than Cunningham's injury update. Fans didn't see nerves. They didn't see adrenaline. They saw Hartley laughing while an opponent was being helped off the floor. And for many, that was unforgivable. Now, if this had been someone else, say a player with a clean record, a reputation for sportsmanship, maybe the benefit of the doubt softens the blow. Maybe the internet shrugs and moves on. But this was Bria Hartley, and Hartley's highlight reel isn't just buckets and steals. It's dust-ups, shoves, hair pulls, and more than one ejection. Earlier this year, she yanked Angel Reese's hair, fighting for a rebound. Before that, she went chest to chest with Rebecca Allen and got tossed. She's had flare-ups with Skylar Diggins, Tina Charles, and others. None of those moments on their own would doom her reputation, but in the collective memory of fans, they stack. So when the smirk surfaced, people didn't see it as a one-off. They connected the dots. They said, this is who Hartley is. A repeat offender. A player who doesn't just play hard. She plays dirty. And suddenly, the conversation wasn't about whether the collision was reckless. It was about intent. Theories sprouted everywhere. Did Hartley deliberately launch herself? Was she targeting Cunningham? Was the smirk a tell? A crack in the facade? The internet jury didn't just debate. They convicted. Within hours, the hashtag started. Suspend Hartley. Protect Sophie. Dirty player. What had been a normal, regular season game exploded into a morality play. Hartley became the villain, Cunningham the victim, and the league itself was cast as the negligent referee. Everyone wanted accountability. Everyone wanted someone to answer. But while the outrage online was boiling over, inside the arena, a completely different story was taking shape. One that no one, least of all the Indiana Fever, saw coming. This intro is meatier, close to 3 times the length of the original hook, because it pulls in the entire context of Hartley's reputation, the viral spread of the smirk, and the way perception hardened against her. It gives the controversy its full dramatic weight before pivoting to the collision section. It happened in an instant. Sophie Cunningham, known for her toughness and willingness to take contact, drove hard into the paint. Bodies tangled, feet shuffled, and then impact. Cunningham hit the floor, grabbing at her knee before she could even process what had happened. The arena, already buzzing from the physicality of the game, fell into stunned silence. At first glance, it looked like a hard foul, maybe even a reckless one, but still within the boundaries of what happens in a high-intensity matchup. But replays told a different story. Fans watching closely slowed it down frame by frame. Hartley's launch into Cunningham didn't look accidental. It looked targeted, a collision with just enough force and angle to raise eyebrows. The concern for Cunningham was immediate. Teammates waved for medical staff as she struggled to put weight on her leg. Some players turned away, hands on their heads, the kind of reaction reserved for the injuries everyone dreads. Cunningham's reputation as a competitor only amplified the moment. This wasn't someone who stayed down easily. If she wasn't getting up, something was seriously wrong. And then came the visual that changed everything. Hartley standing a few feet away, wearing that smirk. Not a nervous laugh, not a flash of frustration, but a grin caught in brutal clarity by the broadcast cameras. To millions watching, it looked like Hartley was enjoying what had just happened. Social media didn't hesitate. Within seconds, fans were shouting about intentional contact, calling it a targeting play, and accusing Hartley of laughing at an injured opponent. The smirk became the symbol of the moment. A foul was no longer just a foul. It was the tipping point of a narrative that had been simmering for years. By the time Cunningham was helped off the floor, the conversation had shifted entirely. This wasn't about Indiana losing another player. It was about Hartley, and the story wasn't going away. But that's the thing about reputations, they follow you. And Hartley's baggage was about to come crashing back into the spotlight. This gives the play itself its own spotlight, slowing it down so viewers can relive the collision, then tying the smirk to the fan reaction in real time. In sports, reputation can be as heavy as any stat line, and Bria Hartley didn't walk into this moment with a clean slate. By the time Sophie Cunningham was being helped off the court, fans were already digging through old clips, connecting dots that painted a picture many believed was undeniable. Earlier this very season, Hartley was caught on camera yanking Angel Reese's hair during a rebound battle. The slow-motion replay went viral, sparking a wave of outrage that had both benches barking at each other. Hartley brushed it off as just another physical play, but the footage told its own story. Then came her scuffle with Rebecca Allen, a chest-to-chest confrontation that ended with Hartley being ejected from the game. And that wasn't an isolated incident. She's had dust-ups with Skylar Diggins, clashes with Tina Charles, and a growing list of altercations that seem to follow her wherever she played. Individually, none of these moments might define a career. Plenty of players have heated rivalries or a bad game where tempers flare, but reputations aren't built from single moments. They're built from patterns. And fans began to string Hartley's moments together like beads on a necklace, each one adding weight to the narrative that she wasn't just competitive, she was dirty. So when the smirk surfaced, it didn't land in a vacuum. It landed on top of a highlight reel that already made Hartley hard to defend. If it had been a one-time thing, maybe people would have forgiven it as bad timing. But with that history, the grin felt like confirmation. Analysts quickly joined the chorus. Talk shows began pulling up old footage alongside the Cunningham collision, stacking incident after incident until the storyline felt unavoidable. Words like repeat offender and reckless started surfacing in columns, and fans demanded consequences. Suspension, accountability, something that finally proved the league wouldn't let this kind of play slide. That's the thing about reputations. Once they harden, even silence looks like guilt. And in this case, Hartley didn't just have to answer for one foul. She had to answer for years of baggage. But the smirk didn't just reopen old wounds, it poured gasoline on them. And the narrative was about to spiral far beyond one player. This section deepens the villain framing while keeping the pacing tight, setting up for Section 3, the narrative hardening and calls for suspension. Once the clip of Hartley's smirk hit social media, the outrage didn't simmer, it exploded. Sports talk shows replayed the moment in slow motion, pairing it side by side with her past incidents. Commentators leaned in, calling it the look that crystallized everything people already believed. Suddenly, it wasn't just a controversial foul anymore. It was a career on trial. Fans who had long accused Hartley of reckless play finally had what they saw as smoking gun evidence. Hashtags like suspend Hartley and protect Sophie trended within hours. On TikTok, creators stitched the clip with older footage of Hartley pulling Angel Reese's hair or scuffling with Rebecca Allen, drawing a straight line through her career. Twitter threads labeled her the dirtiest player in the league, and each retweet made the label stick a little harder. The tone turned darker when accusations of favoritism surfaced. Some fans argued Hartley had been allowed to skate by with light punishments in the past, a perception that the league wasn't willing to hold her accountable. Others pointed out that Cunningham's injury only made it worse, because this wasn't just about optics anymore. A player was actually hurt, and Hartley's smirk made it feel personal. Analysts fanned the flames, too. On podcasts and post-game shows, words like repeat offender and reckless disregard began popping up. Several suggested that a suspension wasn't just likely, it was necessary if the WNBA wanted to send a message. Headlines framed the moment as the tipping point, arguing that this was no longer about one play but about the league's credibility. And here's where the narrative locked in: intent. Fans weren't just debating whether the foul was ugly. They were asking if Hartley had meant to do it. Had she targeted Cunningham? Was the smirk a tell? Once those questions took hold, there was no walking them back. By the end of the night, Hartley wasn't just a player who committed a foul. She was the villain at the center of the season's biggest scandal. But while the internet was busy putting Hartley on trial, something remarkable was happening on the court, and it had nothing to do with her. This section captures the snowball effect: social media, media outlets, and fans building the narrative layer by layer until it becomes unavoidable. While Bria Hartley's smirk was busy going viral, the Indiana Fever season was teetering on the edge of collapse. Inside the arena, the scoreboard told a story that looked final. The Fever trailed the Connecticut Sun by 21 points midway through the third quarter. Against most opponents, that's a mountain. Against the Sun, a team built on physicality, depth, and relentless defense, it felt like Everest. But the score was only half the problem. Indiana wasn't just losing the game, they were running out of bodies. Caitlin Clark, the rookie superstar and offensive engine, was already missing, away from the team on Family Matters. Ari McDonald had been sidelined for the year. Sydney Colson, another backcourt option, was unavailable. And now, Sophie Cunningham, one of the few veterans still grinding through heavy minutes, had just been helped off with what looked like a serious knee injury that left a roster that was thin, exhausted, and visibly shaken. Cameras caught the faces on the Fever bench, players staring blankly at the floor, coaches gesturing furiously with no answers, fans in the stands shaking their heads like they'd already seen enough. Connecticut, meanwhile, smelled blood. They pressed Indiana off the dribble, battered them in the paint, and ran the floor with ease. Every rebound was another dagger. The Sun wasn't just beating the Fever, they were breaking their will. By late in the third quarter, even the announcers were ready to move on, their commentary drifting toward Hartley's controversy rather than whether Indiana could mount a miracle comeback. The moment had the feel of a season slipping away. Indiana had fought through adversity before, but this was different. With Clark gone, Cunningham down, and the team buried under a 21-point deficit, it felt like the Fever's thin roster had finally hit its breaking point. Fans online said it out loud. This might be the unraveling. And honestly, who could blame them? Teams don't come back from this. Not short-handed, not exhausted, not against a contender like the Sun. This was supposed to be the point where the Fever cracked for good. But sports have a strange way of flipping the script, because just as it looked like Indiana was finished, something unexpected began to stir. One player refused to let the night and the season end this way. And her eruption would not only flip the scoreboard, it would flip the entire narrative of the game. This makes the brink feel heavy. Injuries stacking, body language crumbling, commentators writing them off. It sets up Section 5 so Mitchell's explosion feels like a thunderclap against total despair. Then came the spark no one saw coming. Kelsey Mitchell, who had limped into halftime with just 4 points to her name, suddenly ignited into one of the most ruthless scoring performances in franchise history. It didn't happen in one big burst. It was wave after wave, possession after possession, until the Connecticut Sun looked stunned, their 21-point cushion dissolving right in front of them. By the end of regulation, Mitchell had dropped 34 points in the second half alone. 34. She finished the night with 38, tying her career high, and she did it with a precision that bordered on cruel. 11 of 22 from the field, 5 of 8 from deep, 11 of 12 at the line. Every time Indiana needed oxygen, she was there with another shot. The shift was almost eerie. In the third quarter, she began attacking the rim with reckless fearlessness, splitting defenders who thought they had her trapped. By the fourth, she was hitting pull-ups in transition, shrugging off double teams, and draining step-back threes that silenced the Connecticut crowd. Her rhythm was surgical: catch, rise, release, net, over and over again. And when the game reached overtime, Mitchell became something else entirely. Assassin mode. She scored Indiana's first 10 points in the extra frame, drilling back-to-back threes that turned a stunned silence into an eruption from the Fever bench. With every shot, her teammates' body language shifted. Slumped shoulders became raised fists, blank stares became roars of belief. Even the commentators, who had spent the third quarter talking like Indiana's season was finished, shifted their tone. The broadcast went from resignation to disbelief. Mitchell is doing this by herself. This is one of the greatest performances we've ever seen in a Fever jersey. By the time the scoreboard flipped, Mitchell had done more than just keep Indiana alive. She had dragged them back from the dead. Connecticut, once cruising toward an easy win, now looked rattled. The Suns' defenders sagged, their hands a half-second late, their heads shaking as if to say, "What else can we do?" It was one of those nights where a player doesn't just score points, they rewrite the entire story. A collision and a smirk might have dominated the headlines at the start of the night, but Mitchell's eruption made sure Indiana's comeback would be remembered as something more than controversy. But even Mitchell's brilliance couldn't carry it alone. For this comeback to stick, she needed help, and the Fever's supporting cast stepped right into the fire. This section makes Mitchell's eruption feel unstoppable, like a force that flipped the game's gravity on its head. Kelsey Mitchell lit the fire, but she didn't carry the blaze alone. For Indiana to finish the comeback, others had to step in, and that's exactly what happened. In the paint, Aaliyah Boston became the anchor that held everything together. Against Connecticut's bruising frontcourt, she posted yet another double-double: 14 points, 13 rebounds, and a box score sprinkled with 5 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. But the numbers only tell part of the story. Every rebound she ripped away from Tina Charles felt like a lifeline. Every kick-out pass to the perimeter gave Mitchell just enough daylight to keep pouring in shots. And when the Sun tried to muscle her off the block, Boston answered with spins, footwork, and sheer power that forced them to respect her presence inside. She wasn't just putting up stats, she was calming a roster on the verge of unraveling. Then there was Odyssey Sims, the veteran guard who played like she'd been scripting this moment for years. With Clark absent and Cunningham out, Indiana desperately needed another ball handler, someone to take pressure off Mitchell and keep the offense flowing. Sims delivered with 19 points and 7 assists, orchestrating possessions with a mix of speed and poise. She attacked gaps in the defense, pushed the pace when the Sun tried to slow things down, and turned broken plays into scoring chances. Watching her in the second half, it was hard to believe she hadn't been running this lineup all season. She looked that comfortable. And then came Lexi Hall. Her box score won't jump out. Just 7 points, 2 rebounds, a couple of defensive stops. But one shot etched her name into the night. In overtime, with the Fever clinging to their fragile lead, Hull caught the ball in the corner, rose without hesitation, and buried a 3. It was the dagger. Connecticut's defenders slumped as the Fever bench erupted, players spilling onto the floor, screaming and pumping fists. Hull's confidence in that moment symbolized what this comeback was built on, role players stepping up, refusing to flinch when the season demanded courage. By the final buzzer, the box score told the truth. Mitchell may have stolen the show, but without Boston's steadiness, Sims's orchestration, and Hull's fearless shot, Indiana never survives the climb. It wasn't just a superstar's eruption, it was a team finding ways to breathe together when everyone else expected them to suffocate. And that unity didn't end when the game clock hit 0. In the locker room afterward, the Fever's resilience turned into something bigger than a comeback. It became their identity. When the final buzzer sounded, the scoreboard read 99-93, and Indiana had completed the largest comeback in franchise history. But the real story wasn't written in the box score. It was unfolding behind closed doors, in the locker room where exhaustion, relief, and pride all collided at once. Head coach Stephanie White stood in front of her players with her voice thick with emotion. This wasn't just a speech about a win, it was a declaration of survival. She told them their grit was worth gold, that what they had just done was proof they could never be counted out, no matter the deficit, no matter who was missing. In a season where injuries and absences had repeatedly shredded the roster, her words hit harder than any highlight. The players didn't need reminding of what they had overcome. They had just lost Sophie Cunningham to injury. Caitlin Clark, the team's face and leading scorer, wasn't even there. Sydney Colson and Ari McDonald were already out for the year. On paper, this was supposed to be the breaking point, the night the Fever finally collapsed under the weight of their losses. Instead, they walked into that locker room as proof of the opposite. Even players who weren't in the building found ways to be part of the moment. Clark, watching from afar, sent out a short message on X. Battled, battled, battled. So proud. Cunningham, fresh from the locker room after her own setback, tweeted simply, Kelsey freaking Mitchell. 4 teammates battered by adversity. Those words carried more than digital weight. They were a reminder that even in absence, the team's unity was intact. And then there was humor, the medicine that keeps locker rooms alive. Sydney Colson, sidelined for the season, posted, "We down to 4 players, but we ball." It was part joke, part truth, and the kind of levity that helps teams breathe after nights like this. That mix, White's fiery speech, Clark's proud message, Cunningham's support, Colson's humor, wove into a single thread, resilience. For a franchise trying to claw its way back into contention, that unity mattered as much as the win itself. In that moment, the Fever weren't defined by who was missing. They were defined by how they refused to break, even when collapse seemed easier. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't smooth, but it was theirs. And as they left the locker room, battered but still whole, one thing had become clear. This wasn't just a comeback. It was the night Indiana rediscovered its identity. But while the Fever walked out unified, the storm around Bria Hartley wasn't over. In fact, the calls for punishment were only growing louder. This section grounds the comeback in emotion, giving the audience a breather after the chaos, but also reminding them that the controversy thread is still alive. By the end of the night, 2 completely different storylines had unfolded. On one side was Bria Hartley, her smirk burned into highlight reels, branded as the league's new villain. To critics, the grin was more than bad optics. It was a window into intent, the crack that exposed her as reckless, even dangerous. Every past incident in her career had been dragged back into the spotlight, stitched into a narrative that painted her as the WNBA's dirtiest player. Fans demanded accountability, analysts talked about suspension, and the league found itself facing a question it couldn't dodge forever. How do you protect players when reputations collide with reality? On the other side was Indiana, a team that should have folded under the weight of adversity but instead delivered the greatest comeback in franchise history. Kelsey Mitchell turned into a scoring assassin. Aaliyah Boston anchored the middle with calm dominance. Odyssey Sims orchestrated the offense like a seasoned conductor. And Lexi Hull, with one fearless three-pointer, put the final stamp on the miracle. Together, they proved something bigger than a win, that resilience can be a team's greatest weapon. The irony is almost poetic. Out of one of the ugliest moments of the season, season. An injury, a smirk, a controversy that left fans fuming, emerged Indiana's proudest moment. A night that began with outrage ended with celebration. A villain was cast, but heroes rose from the rubble. And now the story doesn't end with the final score. It lingers, carried forward by questions still unanswered. Should Hartley face suspension? Should the league finally step in to protect players from reckless reputations? Or is this just the harsh reality of a sport defined by physicality and split-second choices? What we do know is this: one smirk lit the fuse, but what followed was bigger than controversy. It was a comeback that reminded everyone why the game, for all its chaos and conflict, keeps pulling us back in. This conclusion ties everything together while leaving the audience with questions to debate in the comments. A key retention and engagement tactic. The hours after the game didn't cool things down, they made them hotter. Highlight shows replayed the smirk alongside Indiana's comeback as if the league had just staged its own morality play. Clips of Mitchell's eruption were celebrated, clipped into mixtapes, and blasted across social feeds. But Hartley's grin? That became the freeze-frame symbol of the night, locked into memes and outrage threads that reached well beyond WNBA circles. Writers and analysts drew battle lines. Some argued the league had no choice but to suspend Hartley, pointing to her history and the injury to Cunningham as evidence that leniency was no longer an option. Others defended her, insisting that body language can't be put on trial and that the smirk was being blown out of proportion. The debate wasn't just about Hartley, it was about what kind of league the WNBA wants to be. Meanwhile, Indiana's locker room glow carried forward. Players spoke in interviews about unity, resilience, and the message they had sent to the rest of the league. For fans in Indiana, the comeback wasn't just a win, it was a declaration that their team wasn't going anywhere, no matter who doubted them. But that duality, that collision of villain and heroes, controversy and triumph, is what made the night unforgettable. On one hand, Bria Hartley walked away with a scarred reputation and a storm of criticism. On the other hand, the Indiana Fever walked away with belief their season's still alive because they refused to quit. And that's the lasting truth. In one game, the WNBA gave us both its ugliest moment and its most inspiring one. So what comes next? A suspension? A statement from the league? Or another twist no one sees coming? Whatever it is, this story isn't finished, and neither are the Fever. This gives you a strong denouement, keeping viewers hooked until the very end by showing how the fallout extended beyond the game and leaving them primed for discussion. One game, two stories. Bria Hartley's smirk turned her into the league's most talked about villain, while Indiana's miracle comeback turned them into the season's grittiest survivors. And the strange thing is, they're both true. The controversy isn't going away, and neither is the belief Indiana built out of chaos. For the WNBA, this is more than a single headline. It's a crossroads. Do they send a message with Hartley, showing that reckless reputations have consequences? Or do they risk letting fans believe accountability doesn't exist? At the same time, the Fever is writing a different story, one about resilience, unity, and the kind of fight that refuses to die no matter the odds. And that's what leaves us with the question hanging in the air. Which story will outlast the other? Will the villain's smirk be the image people remember, or will it be the night a battered Indiana roster made history? That's where you come in. Should Bria Hartley be suspended for her role in this collision? What does the league need to do to protect its players better? And in the middle of all that, how far can this Fever team actually go? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this isn't just a debate for analysts. This is a conversation for fans, and your voices matter. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Because if this game taught us anything, it's that the WNBA's most dramatic moments are only just getting started. This section leaves the audience with questions, encourages interaction, and ties the whole script back to the core themes: controversy, resilience, and uncertainty. What started as a collision turned into something far bigger. Bria Hartley's smirk made her the face of outrage, a player whose reputation finally caught up to her in the eyes of fans. Sophie Cunningham's injury turned that moment into a flashpoint about intent, accountability, and what kind of play the league should tolerate. At the very same time, the Indiana Fever, undermanned, bruised, and written off, rose from the rubble and delivered the greatest comeback in franchise history. Kelsey Mitchell erupted for 38, Boston and Sims steadied the team, Hull nailed the dagger, and together they refused to collapse when every reason to quit was staring them in the face. That's what made this night unforgettable. One game gave us the WNBA's ugliest moment and its most inspiring one. A villain cast in real time, and a team reborn in the ashes of adversity. So now the questions linger. Should Hartley be suspended? Should the league draw a line to protect players from reckless reputations? And can the Fever carry this resilience forward into the rest of their season? The answers won't come easily. easily. But one thing's certain, this wasn't just a game. It was a statement about accountability, about survival, and about how quickly the story of a season can change in a single night.